Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Adams.
And Elizabeth Wallace. And you're listening to Binary System Podcast number 212. And tonight, oh my God, we're actually doing what we said we were going to do.
We are going to be discussing the Oscar-winning movie Parasite, because we have both managed to watch it this week.
Yeah, I just got finished watching it about 5 minutes before we started recording, because, I had a whole week to watch it, and I ended up having to watch it at the last minute, but that's how I roll. But anyway.
Yeah, you may be able to come up with some more observations on it since it's so fresh in your mind. Nathan and I saw it last Monday at Alamo Drafthouse, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah, when you had said that it was excellent, it was not what you expected. I really did go into this movie about as blind as I possibly could, and I'm glad I did. It wasn't, I guess, considering that this is the same guy behind Snowpiercer, I guess I was expecting in a little way to have it be science fiction, but it really wasn't. But it felt like it in a few places, but it wasn't.
I was definitely thinking there was going to be some... Well, I was thinking about a conspiracy, but I was thinking about a conspiracy on a much grander scale.
Right.
The fact that this was one family glomming onto one other family.
Yes.
It was a much smaller scale, and yet it was epic in a way.
Yeah. The whole plans of getting everybody into place in the house. And I feel like the story kind of goes up and up and up and up and up until right when they're at the beginning of that little celebratory dinner that they're having while the family's gone camping, because at the very beginning of that dinner, they're all just kind of happy and having a good time and just sort of enjoying their success. And then the dinner starts to go a little sour because they start to get drunk and start to snipe at each other. And then the family comes back, and the whole point of that entire story just went downhill all the way from there, just a real steep slope.
It was shocking, especially because I was really delighted about the beginning of the movie. And I think...
Yes.
Of course, this is a Korean director, so there's going to be different beats. It's a real different feel to how the story is put together. And one thing was how the family worked together to get themselves insinuated in this rich family's life. And I feel like if this was a Western production, there would be a lot more having to convince everybody that this was necessary, or everybody having to really train everybody, or there'd be some weaknesses and there'd be a whole lot of explanations. No, everybody just jumped on it. They were ready to go.
And they did all their research, and they were so good at improvising, and everybody did great. But even then, you're kind of like, oh yeah, they did everything perfect. It was great. But towards the latter half of the movie, you've got the rich family talking about how they were they kind of smell. It's almost a little too much, but it's not. So like the whole time we've been going, oh wow, they did everything perfectly. Well, apparently not perfectly. So.
And I read in the trivia for this movie that I guess the reason for the movie being called Parasite, it's not just the poor family that's parasitic, because... Well, the trivia said that the rich family, every single member needed a companion because they weren't able to rely on each other like an actual family would. I guess I can agree with that. I was also expecting when I, started seeing the poor family glomming onto the rich family, I was expecting the rich family to be a lot nastier.
Me too. Yeah.
When really they were just so naive. This whole idea about, oh, I know nothing about you, but you're handing me a business card and my son likes you, so you're obviously good people. I mean, they didn't even need that much convincing to bring total strangers into their house.
No, and I'm exactly with you on that one. I kept expecting for us to find out something about the rich family that I'm like, oh, they're really horrible people. We never really did, I have no idea what the husband does for a living, but it didn't, I thought maybe they'd get it in there that, oh, he has a company that does this horrible thing or this useless thing. I don't know that we ever knew what he did. There was some kind of idea I had when he was talking to the father that maybe he was actually cheating on his wife, but we really didn't get any evidence of that either.
Nope.
No, they were perfectly nice, just really naive as to the way everybody else has to live. And speaking of which, oh my God, the flood scene in the house.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, wow.
That was another bit of a trivia that I liked, that apparently they used face mud mask to make the sewage coming up in their apartments sufficiently brown.
Oh, boy. It was just like you've had the worst night that you could imagine, and then you come home and that's what's happening in your home, and it's just so relentlessly seriously awful, into the girl sitting on top of the exploding toilet just trying to smoke a cigarette. And I'm like, oh my God.
Especially since they had used that weird little raised alcove where the toilet was. They used that as a sort of refuge at one point, like, ooh, the wireless signal is good here. And they just accepted it without even questioning. Not like, ew, I don't want to sit up there. That's the toilet. Nope, that was where they sat. That was where they had the wireless.
That was where they sat. Oh, man. I read in the trivia, I like the fact that, that house, the wonderful house that they were at, they're talking about how it was designed by such and such a designer and everything. It was actually a set built from scratch. And apparently the director brought the plans. He'd been making notes and had these plans, and he brought it to like an actual architect designer for some inspiration or whatever. And the architect designer was like, nobody would ever build a house like this. It's ridiculous. I think that added to it. I mean, it was just so opulent.
Yes.
I mean, every single thing about it.
Yeah. And now I'm just kind of like trying to remember all my favorite parts about the movie. One part that freaked me the hell out was the mother. The rich mother is telling her housekeeper, the poor family's mother, about why her son is so difficult and needs so much extra care. And it's because he found out that the house is haunted. And you see from this little boy's point of view as he's sitting on the floor eating his birthday cake that he wasn't supposed to be getting into late at night. And he looks over at where that alcove is, where the other family was hiding out. And you just see the top of somebody's head and the eyes staring out. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God. Oh, that was right out of a nightmare. That was so awful. On a different level of awful, the entire bit where the family's like, oh yeah, we're almost there. We should be there in 8 minutes. And everything that they had to do to try and get the house, I didn't think they were going to do it.
I didn't either.
There's no way in 8 minutes. Oh my God.
And the way the poor family's mother was on the phone being all bright and cheery and, oh yes, of course she'll, cook this, Korean dish, whatever, that their son really, really likes. And she hangs up and turns around, like, what the hell is, and names that dish. And I just thought that was the perfect touch for the end of that conversation.
Yes. And the thing I wondered is that the kid really liked it, and after all that preparation and having to throw it together at the last second, of course the kid doesn't want to eat it, because of course the kid doesn't want to eat it. And the mom sits down and she eats it, and there's no comment made whatsoever. But she was throwing together a thing of ramen, and I'm wondering, I need to look this up. I could have before the podcast, but I didn't. I'm wondering if, the rich mother actually thought that there was a thing called Ramdon, and it was just the ramen that her kid liked to eat and everything, and that's why she just accepted it so blithely. I'm like, because she is awfully naive. You could just sell her anything as being a thing, and she would buy it if you were convincing enough.
Yeah, I mean, they kept hammering that over and over again. This family, this rich family, is not really built to survive in the world. I mean, if they didn't have money, no, they wouldn't. They'd be dead in a week, I think, just because of they don't know how other people live. They don't really know how to judge whether someone is trustworthy or not trustworthy. I mean, think about that. Their previous housemaid was keeping her husband in the basement in their house for years, and they had no idea.
Oh, I loved how the movie just really loved to linger on the differences between where the poor family lived and where the rich family lived. I mean, you have these just amazing scenes of the poor sections of Korea. I have no idea where those would be located or how much of it was sort of dressed up for a set, but just the conditions that people are living in that we would look at and be like, oh my God, it's squalid, but these are how people are living, and it's their day-to-day life. And then you go back, like in the scene right before the party where the rich mom is driving all over town, getting all these supplies, shopping in the best stores, driving through the best neighborhoods in her expensive car. I mean, it's just the difference between the two, while the other family is like picking through the donated clothes in the gym where they had to sleep for the night because their house was flooded with sewage. It was just amazing.
And yet somehow all of it was still beautiful. I mean, that scene where the dad and the two kids, they've just managed to escape the house without the rich family finding out that they were there, and they're walking through the pouring rain, and they go down this long staircase up against a brick wall with the water pouring down. I'm just like, that was gorgeous, even though they were suffering. They were having to deal with the fact that all of their plans were pretty much out the window as they knew it at the time, and yet it was still beautiful to look at.
It was amazing. Boy, I talk about how the movie was like a gentle slope upward until you've got the party scene and then it sloped back down. But, I mean, the introduction of the husband was just so out of left field, the one who'd been hiding in the basement for 4 years. I'm like, what the hell movie did I just step into?
Exactly.
Everything's off the table. This changes everything. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Yeah, I definitely see why. I mean, it's an artsier movie than you would get from like a traditional blockbuster. And I really see why it got Best Picture, because it's so meticulously done. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
And the trivia also talked about the ending, and that the director felt that, it was kind of mean for him to end it that way. But I don't know if it would have gotten the Oscar if it had ended with that dreamlike, yes, the son eventually manages to become rich enough to buy that house so he can set his dad free from where he's hiding. And then it goes back to the basement. And you're like, yeah, it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. And that's the thing they keep talking about. What is it? Your friend, I think David, had said, do not try to make this over as an American movie so it can, win more awards or reach more people and everything. An American movie, I'm pretty sure would have stopped at the hug out in the backyard.
I think so, yeah, because you'd have to have a feel-good ending, and that's not really what the story is about. It's about the impossible divide between, the very wealthy and the very poor people who feel like if they just work hard enough or they just scam people enough, they will belong to that world as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely not what I was expecting.
No,
but
not
really,
even at all,
really
which is great.
It. Yeah. So my question is, they're going to do a TV series based on Parasite?
Really? No.
Yeah.
A Korean one?
Yeah, I think so. There's just a tiny bit of information, but they said something like it's a limited series, and the director's calling it like a 6-hour film is what he's looking at. And I'm going, not with the same family, I would think. I don't know.
I guess I would watch 6 hours of this director showing the differences between the haves and the haves not. I would be down for that.
I mean, it's truly a tragicomedy. I mean, there's so many funny bits and hilarious things going on, and it's so depressing in places. So they did a good job jumping that divide too. But
well, speaking of depressing, because we had watched Parasite, Nathan and I decided to rewatch Snowpiercer, which there was a lot that I remembered about it, but I had not remembered exactly how violent it is. I mean, that movie is really violent, but also beautiful, especially that shot of Chris Evans standing in the entranceway to the engine of the train. That was really gorgeous. But there was a couple bits of trivia that I really liked. And one was that you had the one guy, the artist, who was like, would draw the different characters. Yeah. Apparently, those drawings were done by Jean-Marc Rochette, I think is how his last name is pronounced. That's the comic book artist for the original graphic novel that the movie was based on, which is really
love it
nice.
When they do stuff like that. That's great.
But the other bit was that the director apparently now this was a Weinstein Company movie.
Oh, yeah.
I know. And I'm wondering how much longer all of these movies are going to have the Weinstein name in front of it, because it just makes me cringe every time I see it now. It's not the movie maker's fault. It's just, ugh. But apparently the director butted heads with Weinstein a lot about this movie, because Weinstein wanted to make it into the movie that he wanted. And of course, the director has a completely different vision. Well, Weinstein didn't want to have that one scene with the fish. Remember the glassed-in room with all the fish? I don't think they even said why Weinstein didn't want that. And the director really wanted to keep that in, and he told him that this was an homage to his father, who had been a fisherman. And Weinstein agreed that family and, fatherhood is important, so he allowed it to stay in. And apparently the quote from the director in an interview afterwards was, "It was a fucking lie. My father wasn't a fisherman."
I love that.
Yes.
Oh, let's stick it to the man. Boy, I mean, I guess he really recognized he's just got to find what's going to sway the stupid guy with the money long enough for him to let him alone and make the movie that he wanted to make. And, oh, man. Yeah, I need to rewatch that one again. I thought about watching that one earlier this week, but you know what I rewatched?
Oh, what?
Inception.
Oh, neat. Yes, I started watching that. I haven't gotten all the way through yet, but oh boy, that's another pretty movie.
Oh, man. I've probably watched that movie all the way from beginning to end at least 4 times now. 2 of those was in the theater, too. But the third act, still still not entirely sure of the logistics of the third act. Like, I remember when I saw it in the theater, I was like, oh, yeah, the third act, that's with the skis and the snow and the giant big building, whatever. Sure, fine. And watching it now, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the bit with the skis and the snow and the giant big building and lots of explosions and everything. But, it's just the timing of things sometimes throws me off a bit. But man, I feel like I get more out of it every time I watch it.
This will only be my second time rewatching it, so I'm looking forward to studying a little bit more. Sometimes I'm not sure about the rules of the world, like whose dream are they in at each particular time, and why does DiCaprio's relationship with his dead wife somehow managed to influence everything that's going on in all these other dreams.
That's true. I mean, I could understand it if we were specifically in DiCaprio's head or it's his project. I guess it's because, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'd start to explain it. I'm like, I'll get confused. The only thing I know that keeps things kind of set for me is that as you go down levels in dreams, they are affected by what's happening on the dream above, but they happen so much slower.
Right.
So that kind of, I can get that part. I get the idea that the dream, when he was showing Ariadne around, they were inside his head, and she was inside his dream, and those were his... No, I think it's the other way around. They were inside her head, and he'd come in and his projections, and they recognized, and that's why they attacked her. They attack the dreamer. So that's why when you're in the scene where Joseph Gordon-Levitt does the cool special effects all through the hallway, which is really 4 times over, and I still love that scene so much. He couldn't go down into the next dream because he was the person who was dreaming that whole hotel thing that they were in. And that's why the projections were attacking him, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
Complicated.
Yeah, I rewatched that one, of course, because I'd seen Looper the other week, and I saw Looper because Knives Out, which I haven't seen Knives Out yet, and I think that's probably going to have to be next on my list.
That will be cool. So I'm trying to think, we had tried to figure out before you watched Parasite what we could talk about. A couple of things that came up. The trailer for the new Netflix Transformers series, which I'm intrigued by. I like, dialogue's a little over the top, but it's a trailer about a movie with giant robots punching each other, so that's to be expected. I like the alt modes. I like the design of everybody's faces. I'm willing to give this one a go.
And it's part of the trilogy, and I haven't seen any of the other ones in the trilogy.
No,
right?
I should probably sit down and start watching things because I'm a bad fan when it comes to the Transformers cartoons that I've watched. It's G1 pre and post movie, and that's pretty much it. And it makes me really, really fussy about designs for characters because I'm always wanting it to be like G1.
I know, and there's so much. I mean, I know people who just love and adore Armada, and I feel like I have got to watch that at some point. So apparently Starscream has a pretty good arc in that one as well.
And there's also diehard fans of Beast Wars. I mean, the Transformers game that I'm playing on my phone, it's got a lot of Beast Wars characters, which do nothing for me, but they're brought in because they're super popular with a lot of people.
I mean, honestly, they were doing that in More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light for a little bit there. We had several characters who were brought in who definitely came in from I guess it was more like the Till All Are One world because it was Windblade and the people trying to bring in the other colonies. And these other colonies, I think, were right out of other Transformers incarnations. I don't know exactly which ones because I've only ever watched G1.
But speaking of people liking things that other people don't, I feel like we need to address the complete dumpster fire that Twitter turned into because of the release of a certain action figure, or at the very least, a release of the picture of what it was going to look like.
So they released its Flame Toys, and Flame Toys makes some gorgeous models.
Boy, howdy.
Just freaking beautiful stuff. And they decided to do Windblade. There are some issues.
Now, what we should start by saying, and I think one of the reasons why, Twitter, but really any conflict can go so bad so quickly is because people want to assign motivations to the people they disagree with. Yes. And I think that happened here. Now, all right, so Windblade's, the picture was released, and My problem with it, I have two problems with it. One, it doesn't look like Windblade. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
No, she doesn't have wings. Where are her wings?
Yeah, I think some of the pictures, there are some other pictures that she does actually have wings, but they're detachable. And the picture that they had of her did not have them. But her face doesn't look right.
No.
And she really doesn't look like she does in the comic books or anything that I've seen. I mean, I've got a toy of Windblade that looks more like Windblade than this thing does. And like I said, I'm a G1 fan, and I will base my love of any series on how close to the Generation 1 style it is. I mean, that's the main reason why I only ever watched one of the Michael Bay Transformers movies, because it didn't look enough like the cartoon. So
exactly,
that sort of thing is important to me. The other thing that bugs me is that Flame Toys has done some beautiful designs of all the other characters. They look really cool, very powerful poses in a stylized way that makes it look almost like a comic book drawing or a cartoon. And then they do Windblade, and she looks like a fuck toy. I'm sorry, she does.
She really, and you know what? My thing is, there are hypersexualized versions of action figures all over the place. There's like a whole line that does, all the X figures, and hell, I even saw a super sexualized version of the Pinhead from Hellraiser.
Holy cow.
Yeah, right. That's a thing. That happens. And I understand. I mean, I don't want to tell people what they can and can't like. And, guys, they do like the sexy stuff. Or, some women like the sexy women stuff. That's cool, too. But my thing is that Flame Toys, all the toys that came before this, were so badass and cool looking and everything. And we got Windblade. I mean, the picture that they chose to show, maybe it would have been different if they'd had a different pose, but I mean, her ass is right there in the front. And that's my biggest quibble. I'm like, yes, there's going to be sexualized version of this stuff. Fine, I accept that. But why is it the first one you do, the female Transformer, you couldn't make her look badass like the other ones? We had to have the sexy one first. I knew we were going to get the sexy one eventually, fine. But it was just kind of disappointing because she's such a cool character. And it was really, I mean, somebody on Twitter, I'll see if I can find the tweet, they said that it wasn't Windblade, it was just a sex bot that they strapped a headdress on and called it Windblade, and that's kind of what it is.
To go back to the assigning motivations things, of course, somebody got mad, and there was a whole lot of people shouting about, to the people who liked it, oh, well, you've always hated the Windblade character, and you're only defending it now because it's being portrayed as something you can fuck, which
does not go over well.
No, it doesn't go over well, and I can't even argue about how true that is or is not. I mean, I do think a lot of people did not like the Windblade character when she came out, because it was like, oh, these SJWs are, trying to drag in feminism and all this, and now we've got this ultra-feminist character, and then you get this sexy version, like, well, hey, we're going to stand by this one. I don't know. I really don't. But a lot of the people who were supporting the character were saying, oh, these women don't want a sexy toy, or they don't want this character to be feminine. And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Take a look at Windblade in the comic books throughout her entire run. She's sexy. She's a sexy character. She's very feminine. But the toy makes the sex part of it the only thing about it. That's it.
Right.
There's nothing about that character says that she's a strong warrior who has a lot of conflict with Starscream and is trying to do the right thing by two different societies. No, it's just I agree with you. I wish they had gone with something that was more faithful to the original design first, and then maybe done an entire line of the sexy toys. I would like to see an ultra sexy Starscream. That would be really cool.
That'd be fun. I mean, think about, we do actually have feminine Transformers now. You could have, a sexy Chromia, a sexy Nautica. There'd be a lot of people who would pay a lot of money for that. But this was the first, I don't think Flame Toys has done an Arcee. I should check that. I don't think they have. But it's such a big deal, and the fact that they just went to the sex thing. But one of the things that was making the dumpster fire worse is you had people complaining about it. You specifically had one Twitter user complaining, which I'm not going to mention her name on here because she did get temporarily driven off of Twitter by the trolls. But she was complaining about it, and there's all this uproar, and next thing you know, the company actually pulled the image from online. You can find the image anywhere now. It's way too late, but there's all these people saying that she got the toy canceled, and that made people jump on her and organize a whole thing to completely blast her all over Twitter, and she did actually shut down her account for a while, but she does seem to be back.
Yeah, she is. Like. She came back.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of people who were like, how dare you do this? And I'm like, well, you know, a lot of those people weren't going to buy the toy anyway, but they're all incensed that now it's not a thing, and some girl had to spoil all our fun, which I know a lot of guys who think that. I've known guys personally who think that, you know, once a woman gets involved, it stops being fun. And I'm like, that's not really fair.
Well, that was the Best Pick podcast that Hannah recommended to me, which I'm almost caught up on all the episodes that they've done so far. Jess on the show, one of the podcasters, she talks about how irritating it is that in fiction and in movies and film and TV or whatever, the woman's role in a lot of this is to say, don't do the interesting thing. And that seemed to be what Pepper Potts was in some of the Iron Man movies. She was the one saying, don't do the interesting thing, don't be Iron Man. And she did that for most of her run up until, you know, the very end, which she was finally supportive. And it's just kind of irritating that that is what women are portrayed as, to the point where everybody thinks if a woman gets involved, it's going to suck. All the fun will be gone. And I don't know. And, you know, back to the assigning motivations. If maybe people had listened to each other and said, no, wait a minute, we don't want you to cancel this completely, but why couldn't you do a, you know, something that's more faithful to the character for the sake of all these people who are fans of the character, who are fans of the character? It's like Hollywood adapting a book or a TV show or a comic book or something to a film that a lot of people have liked, and the first thing to do is change everything that people liked about it. I never got that, because you're trying to capitalize on an existing fan base, and that the first thing you do is make them mad.
Yeah, and which is another thing that surprised me. I mean, I've wandered around forums before where a toy gets released, and the super fans will pick it apart depending on how accurate they think it is. I mean, they've used the faceplate from this incarnation, but it's clear the Cybertronic version of this one over here because of the alt mode and whatever. I mean, they will go into the minute detail. Well, that model doesn't look like any incarnation of Windblade that I've seen. It just looks like a super sexy sex bot, which, once again, fine. I'm aware that all exists, and I would never say that it couldn't exist, but it is just disappointing that we didn't have a badass one like we've had from every other one. And like you said, she is sexy in the comics, and they couldn't have her like Windblade version sexy. They had to do sexbot sexy. But even all that, I'd be fine with everybody yelling at each other and people assigning motivation and everything. But when you organize a bunch of people specifically to drive them off of social media, I mean, I'm not even comfortable a lot of times with the dogpiling that goes on when it's somebody that I don't agree with. It really does feel like mob mentality. There's people who get involved in the yelling who don't have a dog in this fight, you know? They don't care one way or the other. They just like to jump on people. And I think if you're joining in on the dogpiling, I think there's better things to do with your time. And, you know, fine. If you don't like somebody's opinion on Twitter, block them. And people do it all the time. Why sit there and organize a mob?
Yeah, we really have gotten to this mindset lately that you win the argument when you terrify somebody into backing away from the argument completely. Yeah. I don't like that at all. And I don't, you're right. It does make me uncomfortable when people that I think are really awful are, you know, ratioed on Twitter sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I'll be honest, sometimes, especially when it's different, when it's, you know, not somebody that you like particularly much. You know, you see that somebody's stupid ass comment has been ratioed to death, and you're like, aha, take that. And I'm like, technically this is still, it's the exact same thing that's being done to other people that I like, and I think it's unfair, but anyway, I can't stand on my high horse too much about that.
I don't know. I remember when you wrote a piece about Jeremy Renner and him referring to Black Widow as a slut. And I love the phrase he used at one point about disagreeing with someone, saying, can we keep the death threats to a minimum, like, say, none?
Yeah, no. If you're seriously throwing around threats of death or harm to somebody, would you please be a better person? Please, for crying out loud. I cannot think of any time when that's justified. But, like I said, I can't I can't be too high and mighty about this. You know, sometimes the drama is fun to watch on Twitter until you realize that there's a real person on the other side of it. So maybe not with the death threats. But anyway, I'm curious to see what happens with this.
I hope that we get a good Windblade figure out of it at some point. Ooh, I don't know if it's a guarantee that the sex bot is definitely canceled.
No,
Who knows?
Yeah, they may have... I don't know, give us the sexy version, but just pose her slightly different. I mean, her ass is right.
She's got ass cheeks. I did see somebody comment and said, how come Windblade got ass cheeks and Optimus Prime didn't?
Right, exactly. Though somebody did point out there is one version of Transformers. It's one of the animated versions that I never watched, but they have this funny thing where, you know, you've got like the pelvic piece, and then you have the leg pieces, and then somebody decided it'd be cool to have these cool, like, electronic lines in between them. And so he's like, wow, it looks like garter belts. And I'm like, I can't unsee that now every time. Great.
I will say one thing about because a lot of people said, oh, okay, you women are being so hypocritical because you've got like all of these cases where you have fiction with these big strapping guys with these huge muscles, you know, and their necks bigger than their head. And obviously women are sexualizing men. I'm like, no, I don't really think that's the case. I think the ultra-muscled man is a male power fantasy.
Yes.
And because think about the first Avengers movie. Who was the character that so many people went wild for? Loki. They did not go for the Hulk with all of his big muscles. It was Loki.
I mean, think about one of my favorite bad guy turned good guy characters of all time, Damon Salvatore, played by Ian Somerhalder, who is a very good-looking guy with a very nice body, but he is by no means one of those super muscled-looking dudes. He's like lanky. That's how I like him. But yeah, I know some women like the big power, you know, muscle thing too and everything. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's complicated, guys.
It is complicated. It is really complicated. I mean, there's just as many different preferences as there are people in the world. So let's just try and not be judgy.
And the two of us, speaking on behalf of all women and all Transformers fans everywhere, obviously.
Yes, right, because we're the spokespeople. We're not spokespeople. We're not. Not even a little.
I'm sorry, guys. I've run out of room in my house for more stuff, so I'm afraid I'm not even the target audience. I'm sorry.
I know, here it is. We're talking about a toy that I probably wasn't going to buy anyway, so, you know. So just to jump sideways into comic book worlds for just a second, did you hear that Dan Didio, and I hope that's how his name is pronounced, he's one of the co-leaders of DC Comics? He just lost his job on Friday.
I saw somebody was cheering about it on Twitter, and everyone was commenting about how that was kind of classless, but then the person responded that Dan Didio was kind of awful to people and deserved. I don't know the whole story.
I don't either. I asked Leland about it because Leland's got the comic book shop in Burbank, and of course Leland can't say anything officially, but he did know some things that suspected, because I was like, were they planning on doing that, or was that out of nowhere? And from what Leland knows, it was a little bit out of nowhere. And it means I'm really curious to see what the direction of DC is going to be moving forward. I keep wondering if it has anything to do, like Birds of Prey. I've heard a bunch of people say that it was marginally better than Suicide Squad, but it was still a little bit of a mess and didn't quite succeed in what it was trying to do. And other people say it's very fun, but I just wonder if, I don't know, I mean, he was comics, but it's all kind of tied together, and was that, I mean, I'm speculating, I have no idea, but apparently there were some plans to do some really big shakeups in the comic book world, and now everything's off the table. Who knows what's going to go forward? But the only DC comic that I've been reading lately is one called Far Sector, and that's Jamal Campbell, who's doing the art, which is friggin' gorgeous, and N.K. Jemisin has been doing the story.
So how is it?
It's good. I really enjoy it. And it's supposed to be, we just hit the 4th issue, and I think it's supposed to be 12 issues total. And it's interesting because I went in there thinking, oh, I'm just, you know, picking up stuff about these characters, you know, as I go, because I don't read the comics, and I probably should have done some research. No, most of what's going on is completely new. This is a brand new character, and a lot of her situation, we're finding it out for the first time. So it's a really good comic to jump in on if you haven't been reading a lot of DC stuff, because we're all supposed to be learning at the same time.
Cool. Well, I will have to check that out. I still need to finish The Wicked and the Divine. I haven't read any more, and I know I need to borrow the issues from you. I just need to buckle down and read that. But what I have been working on, and by the time this episode drops, I'm sure it'll have posted, Andrew Hunter Murray from No Such Thing as a Fish released a sci-fi book called The Last Day, and I'm like 40 pages away from the end of it. So, and I'm enjoying it. It's really good. It's like not a mystery, intrigue, spy, thriller kind of thing, but it's set on an Earth where the Earth, because of some cosmic event, stops spinning. So there is like one tiny slice of the Earth that is habitable, because half of the Earth is going to be, almost half of the Earth is too hot and the other half is too cold. So there's this one small little bit, and it just happened to be over the UK where that livable space fell. It's really good. It's very clever too, and he's obviously done a lot of work studying not just he didn't take a murder mystery or something and shoehorned it into a different planet. It's all he actually studied. Well, what would the effect of that be, and how would governments react to a situation like that, and what would the weather be like, and how would people live in a situation like that? So I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, every time I've been hearing about this book, because of course I listen to No Such Thing as a Fish every week, and they've talked about it a bit, but it always did sound like a thought exercise that somebody just expanded into an entire novel, which sounds really good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I need to read that one too. Currently, I'm reading the second book in T. Kingfisher's series about the Clockwork Boys.
Oh, yeah.
What is it? What is the series? It's called The Wonder Engine is the second book. What is the series
called?
The
Clocktar Wars.
That's right, which I think is such, the first book is called Clockwork Boys, which I'm like, that's fine, but not everybody calls them Clockwork Boys. Some people call them Clocktors, and I'm like, oh, well, I would be one of the people calling them Clocktors, because that's really cool. Yeah, it's awfully good. I feel like I've really immersed myself in her writing lately, because I read Sword Heart, immediately jumped into Clockwork Boys, and then immediately jumped into The Wonder Engine, and I'm like, more, all of the things. So I'm going to have to read The Twisted Ones, which is her horror one. I've heard is very disturbing.
And that was actually something that I wanted to ask you, because she just released another book called Paladin's Grace, and it's about a paladin and a perfumer. And I have been very curious about that, but I wanted to give you the chance to maybe read it and review it for the site if you wanted, or are you going to jump right to The Twisted Ones?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. You write such good reviews of it, though. I might just let you have that one. All your reviews of her stuff are always really good, so maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll hash that out later, I'm sure.
So one last thing before we sign off. We wanted to give a shout-out to Steve C. As you remember, he bought us a coffee through our coffee link on our post page, and we made up a little story about him, and I just checked my email, and we got another coffee bought for us because he wanted to let us know that he is a Marvel fan. We were saying, I bet he's not a Marvel fan. I bet he's tired of Marvel. No, he is a Marvel fan. And he has a cat named Princess Leia. So he's a Star Wars fan too, which is awesome. So I'm like, okay, so Star Wars. And then I was thinking, what could we do? Would he be a Jedi or would he be a smuggler? And I was like, what if he's both? And he has a co-pilot who is, I don't know. And see, the thing is, this is where the fact that I've never seen all of Rebels and I've never seen all of the Clone Wars. So those would have been the things that would have brought in more alien species for me to think about. So I don't know, does Star Wars have a cat-like creature? The obvious answer being, Wookiees are kind of, but, anyway. So, best case scenario, I would think that his co-pilot is a woman cat creature whose name is Princess Leia, and she's named Princess Leia because of the hero of the rebellion. Like in BoJack Horseman, there's a character, Princess Carolyn. That's her name. Her first name Princess, last name Carolyn. That's her name. So this would be, her name would be Princess Leia, named after the hero of the rebellion. But there's also a chance that maybe his co-pilot's a Wookiee who's named Princess Leia, which would be even funnier.
That would be even cooler, yes.
Yeah. So now we'll have to write some more. What color would his lightsaber be, this rogue Jedi that we're talking about?
Oh, God. That's a good question.
Because I know there's so many, and I know the yellow one that Rey had in the final movie, spoilers, that is the only one that's ever existed. And I know Samuel L. Jackson has a purple one.
Right.
And of course, Kylo Ren had a red one. I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of blue and green and whatever. I don't know. I'll have to research this because apparently the different colors mean different things now.
I don't know. I remember reading a Star Wars book. It might have been The Crystal Star. And one of the bad guys had a lightsaber that was powered with the Force, that you literally couldn't turn it on unless you had Force powers. And sometimes I wonder if there is, I mean, even for other lightsabers, if there is some connection to the Force with the wielder.
Well, I think, they go on about the crystals that are put inside because, if you go to Star Wars, the Star Wars experience in Disneyland and everything, you can do a build your own lightsaber and you pick the crystal and all that kind of stuff. And there's been a lot of stories based on that. I haven't read any of them. But so it has a lot to do with the crystal that you pick. I'm sure there are diehard Star Wars fans who are screaming their heads off at how wrong we're getting all of this. I'm sorry. And a lot of those books aren't canon anymore, so whatever. But yeah, apparently, though, I think Thrawn was brought into Star Wars Rebels, so he's canon again. So.
I think so. Yeah, that's
pretty cool.
It's a thing. I think Wendig's books actually gave a mention about Thrawn, about a general that had been sent off into the far reaches of the universe as sort of a contingency plan. So I think that may have been how they planned to bring him in, which apparently they did.
Okay. And Wendig's books were post them wiping out all of the previous books.
Right. Yes, they were. That was the journey to the Force Awakens. So these all three of them took place in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens.
Right. Well, we don't stand on ceremony here. We will pick and choose. When we're making up stories about generous people, we will pick and choose what we want to believe.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna pick a blue lightsaber for now, and then I'm going to actually do some research when we get off and see if that would be an appropriate lightsaber for a rogue Jedi smuggler type. I'm going to probably say that he doesn't have a Millennium Falcon type ship, because that would probably be pushing the analogy a little too far.
Probably, yeah.
So thank you again, Steve, for your donation. That was very cool. Super fan. So very, very nice. These will go towards, we listed in previous episodes all the things that we can use that money for other than coffee. So yeah, that's really very cool of you to do that, and enjoy being a rogue Jedi smuggler type. Oh, there goes a car. So everybody drink. Drink noise. So I guess that's going to wrap us up for the week. So make sure to check out PixelatedGeek.com for all the book reviews, the movie reviews, the comic book reviews, the photo galleries. How soon is it until North Carolina Comic Con?
Middle of March. So, and I was supposed to get a shipment, like I ordered a thing of Bondo off of Amazon because it was a smaller amount than you can get in Lowe's. It hasn't arrived yet. It was supposed to arrive yesterday. So, but then again, there was also a letter from Mom that was supposed to arrive on Thursday. So I don't know what's going on here.
Okay, fine. But so WonderCon will be coming up in April. And so far from Pixelated Geek, we have myself, Stephanie Agnes, Leland Pierce, and then we also have Lauren Wilson, Ariana Hester, and Alex DeHekashon will be taking photos for us this year. So that's kind of cool. Got a pretty full complement at WonderCon. So look out for all of that and more. PixelatedGeek.com. Guess next week we've got another Night Vale episode?
Yeah, because February is ending at the end of this week. So yeah, we should have another Night Vale episode.
All right, part 2 of our 5-parter over on that storyline. So, and I'm sure we'll find other things in the nerd world to talk about. So one way or the other, we will talk to everybody in 1 week.
Talk to y'all later.